In Alabama, Ladiamonique Esta Zaire-Simmons, a 27-year-old mother of three, was killed during a dispute later connected to a stand-your-ground defense. In Texas, Felita Bailey, 25, died after gunfire erupted at a crowded gathering, with shifting suspects and conflicting evidence complicating the case. Both investigations have been marked by indictments, dismissals, and unanswered questions, leaving critical details unresolved. These cases highlight the complexities of the legal process and the challenges of establishing accountability. Stay with us as we examine the circumstances and unravel the disturbing details surrounding these two tragedies.
Let them know it's Felita Bailey. Follow me on Snapchat at Felita Bailey.
Okay. Period. You see me.
On August 25th, 2024, Felita Fifi Yovan Bailey, age 25, attended a birthday celebration in Amarillo, Texas. She visited bars on Polk Street with relatives and friends before going to a house party on Avondale Street. At approximately 3 a.m., gunfire occurred. 2 individuals were shot. 1 survived. Felita Bailey was pronounced dead at the hospital. Police investigated multiple witnesses who gave conflicting statements. Dylan Black was arrested and charged with murder, but the charges were later dismissed. Maron Bailey was later identified as a suspect. He was located by U.S. Marshals in Houston and indicted by a Potter County grand jury for murder. His case is pending trial. Felita Bailey's family has held vigils and public demonstrations demanding accountability. The case remains unresolved as legal proceedings continue.
Hey, this is Kip Billups. I'm at 3rd and Taylor in front of the police station with Miranda Bailey. And can you spell your last name?
B-A-I-L-E-Y.
Okay, and why are y'all here today?
We're here having a rally for my niece. She has been in a senseless murder, and we're trying to get justice for my niece.
Okay, what happened exactly? Was it 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, on the 31st of August, she was killed.
What's her name?
A party she was invited to. Felita Bailey.
Okay.
Was invited to a party, and there was the altercation there, and she ended up being killed, and there was a person charged, and then they let him go, so we're getting justice for my niece.
Understood. And so far they haven't brought any other charges?
We haven't had anything else. No, sir.
So they dropped the charges against that person and let him go?
Yes, sir.
And
so we're needing justice.
Okay, so what exactly do you want the police to do?
To bring justice for my niece.
Fair enough.
Give peace to the family so we can actually...
Okay, I remember hearing about this on the news, which is such a tragedy. And I appreciate your time.
Okay.
And have a good day. God bless and good luck.
Thank you.
Stay with us as we unravel the shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Felita Yovan Bailey, known to many as Fifi, was born on October 26, 1998, in Amarillo, Texas. She was the daughter of Odessa Bailey and Leon Hayes. Her childhood began in Amarillo, where she spent her early years before relocating to Dallas as a young girl. This move marked an important transition in her life, as she adjusted to a larger city environment while remaining connected to her roots in Amarillo. Growing up in a household centered on family ties, Felita's early experiences were shaped by the presence of both parents and extended relatives. Her upbringing in Amarillo exposed her to a smaller community lifestyle, while her later years in Dallas introduced her to a more urban environment. These two cities will remain significant throughout her life, as she maintained connections to both. Felita attended Mesquite High School, where she was part of the graduating class of 2017. While in high school, she formed long-lasting friendships and developed a reputation as someone full of energy and presence. After graduation, she pursued further studies at Eastfield College, where she began coursework toward becoming a dental hygienist. Her enrollment reflected her interest in the healthcare field and her commitment to securing a professional path for herself. In January 2024, Felita returned to Amarillo Her decision to move back was partly influenced by her desire to spend more time with her grandmother and remain closer to family members. After relocating, she secured employment at Tyson Foods, where she worked on production line. Her role was steady and provided financial support as she planned the next steps toward completing her dental hygienist certification. This move back to Amarillo demonstrated her balancing of immediate employment needs with long-term career aspirations. Felita was widely recognized among her peers for her outgoing and uplifting personality. She was often referred to as the hype man because of her ability to energize a group and bring attention to herself through her contagious laughter and presence. She enjoyed activities such as singing, dancing, and shopping. Felita also maintained an active social media presence, sharing aspects of her daily life with her wider circle of friends and followers. Beyond her public image, she was deeply family-oriented, spending considerable time with cousins and offering them support whenever needed. Felita's primary ambition was to complete her certification and begin a career as a dental hygienist. She saw this as a pathway to long-term stability and professional independence. Her goals extended beyond personal success, as she intended to create a foundation of stability for her family. Having roots in both Amarillo and Dallas, she often expressed a desire to maintain connections to both cities, bridging her life between them. Amarillo is a mid-sized city with a small-town environment and urban characteristics. Social life revolves around close-knit communities, but the city also has a nightlife scene centered around bars and entertainment districts. One notable area is Polk Street, where young adults often gather to drink, socialize, and celebrate on weekends. While these nightlife spaces offer opportunity for connection, they also present risks. After-hours gatherings, fueled by alcohol in large groups, often lead to conflicts and confrontations. Historically, Amarillo has also reflected broader patterns of racial and gender vulnerability, particularly for Black women. Social environments after dark often lack adequate security or oversight, leaving individuals exposed to potential violence. These dynamics would form the backdrop for the events that unfolded on the night of August 31st, 2024. On the night of August 31st, Felita joined family members to celebrate her cousin's birthday. She dressed for the occasion in a black and white outfit, preparing for a night that was intended to be lighthearted. With her group of friends and cousins, she set out to enjoy the evening in Amarillo. The group visited Mulligan's Sports Bar along Polk Street and later stopped at other nearby venues. These bars were crowded with people enjoying the holiday weekend. Within this atmosphere, Felita and her companions mingled, danced, and celebrated. At the same time, the mix of guests included unfamiliar individuals. Among them were uninvited attendees, such as Dylan Zane Black and other men who would later become central figures in the investigation. Subtle tensions arose during the evening as different groups of men exchanged words, setting the stage for conflict. As the bars closed, the gathering transitioned into an after-party on South Avondale Street. The environment inside the house was crowded and loud. People drank, played music, and continued socializing. As the party grew, it attracted individuals who had not been invited. Dylan Black and others arrived, intensifying the already tense atmosphere. Arguments began inside the residence, and a physical fight broke out between guests. Shortly after 3 a.m., the conflict escalated. At approximately 3:19 a.m., gunfire erupted inside the residence. Witnesses later described multiple shooters. In the chaos, Felita was struck in the back as she attempted to move away or leave the area. Another individual at the party was also shot but survived. The sound of gunfire caused panic as guests scattered, some fleeing into the street while others hid inside the home. Emergency services responded quickly to the scene following reports of shots fired. Ambulances arrived and transported both Felita and the second victim to a nearby hospital. Despite efforts by medical personnel, Felita was pronounced dead soon after her arrival. At the Avondale residence, police secured the location, collected evidence, and interviewed witnesses who remained. Officers noted the chaotic state of the scene, with overturned furniture, empty bottles, and shell casings scattered across the floor. Witness accounts varied, with some pointing to one shooter while others claimed multiple individuals fired weapons. News of Felita's death was delivered to her family, leaving them confront the reality of her sudden loss. Meanwhile, the Amarillo Police Department began piecing together the events of the night, identifying potential suspects, and preparing for what will become a complex investigation. In the early hours of August 31st, 2024, Amarillo police officers arrived on the 1300 block of South Avondale Street after receiving reports of multiple gunshots. 2 victims have been transported to a nearby hospital. One of them, 25-year-old Felita Bailey, did not survive. The scene left behind was chaotic, with discarded cups, broken glass, and shell casings scattered across the ground. The residence, which had hosted an after-hours gathering, became the focal point of an investigation that quickly expanded beyond the Amarillo Police Department. Police first canvassed the crime scene, interviewing individuals who had remained nearby and attempting to reconstruct the sequence of events. The primary objective was to establish the number of shooters, the direction of the gunfire, and the immediate motive behind the incident. Detectives collected shell casings, securing them for ballistic analysis to determine whether one or more firearms had been discharged. Surveillance footage from surrounding homes and businesses was also gathered. In several clips, multiple individuals were seen running from the area at the time shots were fired. Witness statements complicated the early investigation. Some attendees claimed to have seen a man pointing and firing a weapon inside the house before chaos erupted. Others described at least 2 different shooters, suggesting the possibility of crossfire. Several witnesses were inconsistent in their recollections, altering details about where they had been standing or which direction they saw gunfire. Alcohol consumption and the late-night environment added further uncertainty. Despite conflicting accounts, a name began to emerge repeatedly: Dylan Zane Black, a 22-year-old present at the gathering. Witnesses placed him near the center of the disturbance, and some alleged he had been seen brandishing a weapon shortly before gunfire erupted. On September 1st, 2024, just 1 day after Felita Bailey's death, Amarillo police arrested Dylan Black and charged him with her murder. The decision followed an accumulation of physical and digital evidence, along with initial witness testimony. According to investigators, surveillance video depicted Black holding a firearm during the incident. Additional leads pointed officers to clothing allegedly worn that night and a gun recovered at a location identified through a witness tip. During questioning, Black provided multiple accounts of the night's events. His statements shifted in detail, with inconsistencies regarding whether he possessed a weapon, whether he had fired it, and whether he fled the scene immediately afterward. Detectives considered these inconsistencies significant, viewing them as possible signs of deception. The arrest was quickly publicized, and news reports framed it as a breakthrough. For Felita's grieving family and a community shocked by the sudden violence, the announcement brought temporary relief. Many believed the case was close to resolution, with a suspect in custody and evidence seemingly tying him to the crime. The appearance of progress proved short-lived. Within days of the arrest, the case against Dylan Black began to unravel. Forensic analysis and additional testimony raised questions that weakened the foundation of the murder charge. Some accounts indicated that Black may have been present with a firearm, but was not necessarily the person whose bullet struck Felita Bailey. Others suggested a second shooter had been involved, complicating the narrative of a single gunman responsible for the fatal shot. On September 6, 2024, officials announced a dismissal of murder charges against Black. Police confirmed that emerging evidence pointed to the presence of another shooter during the after-hours party. The statement introduced new uncertainty. If multiple shooters were involved, the ballistic evidence and conflicting accounts would need to be re-evaluated to establish who had fired the fatal round. The abrupt dismissal shifted public perception. The initial relief that followed Black's arrest gave way to renewed frustration. Community members questioned whether the wrong individual had been targeted in haste. Others speculated about whether Black had been framed, or if he had simply been one participant in a larger conflict that police had yet to untangle. Confidence in investigators diminished as clarity receded, leaving more questions than answers. With the case growing in complexity, the Amarillo Police Department broadened its approach. More than 70 officers were eventually assigned to the investigation. Over 60 search warrants were issued, covering residences, vehicles, and digital devices linked to potential suspects and witnesses. More than 50 individuals were interviewed, though many provided conflicting or incomplete statements, reflecting both fear of retaliation and confusion of the night in question. Given the escalating scope, federal agencies were brought in to assist. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, U.S. Marshals Service, and Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS, joined the effort, adding resources and specialized expertise in handling complex homicide cases. The involvement of multiple agencies signaled the seriousness of the investigation and the challenges faced in producing a definitive account of events. As investigators sifted through the growing body of evidence, attention shifted toward connections outside Amarillo. Witness testimonies began to highlight individuals who had traveled from Dallas to attend the party. These accounts placed another young man at the scene, described as having been in close proximity to Felita at the time shots were fired. Several witnesses, once reluctant, began to identify this individual as a key figure. The expanded probe sought to reconcile contradictions between ballistic findings, video evidence, and personal accounts. Analysts compared shell casings to determine whether more than one firearm had been used. Cell phone data was examined to map the movements of suspects before and after the incident. Surveillance videos from nearby intersections were cross-referenced with time stamps to track vehicles leaving the area. By the conclusion of this phase, the investigation had moved far beyond its initial focus on Dylan Black. Instead, it had become an inquiry into a broader web of interactions, with Dallas connections drawing increased scrutiny. The possibility of multiple shooters was no longer theoretical, it was central to the case. Police publicly acknowledged this reality, confirming what many in the community had speculated since the early days of the investigation. On March 15, 2025, nearly 7 months after the shooting that claimed the life of Felita Fifi Yovan Bailey, the investigation shifted when U.S. Marshals arrested 20-year-old Maron Kanye Bailey. According to law enforcement, Maron, who resided in Dallas, had been identified as a suspect during the months-long inquiry. He was taken into custody following a grand jury indictment that formally charged him with murder in connection to Felita's death. The arrest raised immediate questions. Maron was not a stranger to Felita. He was described as a relative, which introduced the possibility of internal conflict within the family circle. This revelation added complexity to the narrative, as early discussions of crime had focused on outside parties, including Dylan Zane Black, the man initially arrested but later released. Critics of the investigation pointed to the timeline. They argued that police may have delayed Maron's arrest despite possessing early evidence that linked him to the shooting. Reports indicated that Amarillo police had collected extensive witness statements, surveillance footage, and physical evidence in the days following the crime. Yet, Maron's indictment came only after months of extended investigation, which included over 70 officers, 60 search warrants, and 50 witness interviews. This timeline drew accusations of inefficiency and even intentional withholding of information. The community's reaction was marked by shock and suspicion turned inward. Initial expectations had been that the crime was a result of outside violence spilling into a gathering. The discovery that Felita's alleged killer was connected to her own family deepened the sense of betrayal among those closest to her. The narrative shifted from a case of random violence at an after-hours party to a far more personal and troubling story of familial ties intersecting with lethal conflict. Following Maron's arrest, Felita's family responded publicly. Her mother issued a statement, describing Felita as a sweet girl, friend to everybody, emphasizing her daughter's social nature and the broad network of people she had touched. This reinforced a contrast between Felita's character and the circumstances of her death. Her sister expressed disbelief, not only at the fact that Felita was gone, but at the idea that someone tied to the family could be implicated in her murder. This disbelief highlighted how the arrest fractured family trust and intensified grief by introducing questions of loyalty and betrayal. The family also faced financial burdens associated with funeral arrangements. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to cover expenses, with contributions coming from friends, co-workers, and members of the community. The campaign illustrated the extent of support Felita's family received from those who wanted to ensure she was remembered with dignity. Public tributes followed in various forms. Vigils and balloon releases were held in Amarillo and Dallas, providing spaces for mourners to gather. On social media, Felita's story spread widely under the hashtag #JusticeForFeifei. On platforms like TikTok and Instagram, users shared photos, memories, and calls for justice, amplifying a family's message and ensuring the case reached audiences beyond the immediate community. Media coverage initially centered on straightforward reporting from local Amarillo outlets. These news sources provided the public with basic facts about the shooting, the arrests, and the court process. Updates were often limited to law enforcement press releases and court documents. As the case developed, more critical and investigative voices emerged. A publication called The Barbed Wire produced a series of reports that challenged the official narrative. Their coverage raised questions about the Amarillo Police Department's transparency during the investigation. In particular, The Barbed Wire examined why Dylan Zane Black had been arrested so quickly, while Maron Bailey's indictment took months. Even though community rumors suggested his involvement early on, the publication also addressed systemic failures in the handling of the case. Its reporting placed Felita's death within the broader context of Amarillo's history of unsolved or mishandled cases involving Black women as victims of violence. This line of inquiry suggested that Felita's case was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern in which similar victims had not received timely or thorough investigative responses. Beyond local coverage, national interest grew as the case was amplified by social media. TikTok creators produced short documentary-style videos, some of which were shared widely, presenting timelines of events and speculating on unanswered questions. Podcasts also dedicated episodes to the case, highlighting the slow pace of the investigation and the unusual family connection between victim and suspect. These platforms increased the case's visibility, extending it far beyond Amarillo and into nationwide discussions of justice, community safety, and the treatment of marginalized victims. The investigation demonstrated clear gaps in transparency between law enforcement and the victim's family. Family members expressed frustration that they were not consistently informed about developments, and at times they learned critical updates through news outlets or social media, rather than directly from investigators. This lack of communication deepened mistrust and fueled suspicions of mismanagement. The case underscored long-standing concerns regarding how Black female victims are treated within Amarillo's criminal justice system. Community leaders noted that Felita's case was one of several in which Black women were victims of violent crime, but their cases appeared to receive delayed or inadequate responses. This pattern became part of public discussions following her death. The circumstances of the shooting also highlighted the risks of after-hours gatherings in Amarillo's nightlife scene. Police had previously been aware of similar unregulated gatherings where alcohol and firearms mixed in private settings. Critics argue that law enforcement failed to proactively address these environments, allowing violence to erupt unchecked. Felita's case became an example of how under-policing of such situations could lead to fatal outcomes. Finally, the case revealed the powerful role of social media in shaping public understanding of investigations. While platforms like TikTok and Instagram helped keep Felita's story in the spotlight, they also spread unverified claims. The tension between misinformation and fact created additional challenges for investigators, journalists, and the family, who had to continually clarify what was true versus what was speculation. The legal process following the shooting death of Felita Fifi Yovan Bailey has been defined by complexity, multiple suspects, and shifting charges. The initial arrest of Dylan Zane Black, a 22-year-old Amarillo man, came within days of the incident. Black was accused after surveillance footage, and witness accounts placed him at the after-party with a firearm. Investigators recovered clothing and a gun believed to be connected to him, and court documents indicated he gave inconsistent statements during questioning. On September 1, 2024, he was formally arrested and charged with murder. However, the case against Black did not hold. Within the same week, the charges were dismissed. Prosecutors stated that evidence had emerged pointing to the involvement of a second shooter. The district attorney's office explained that pursuing a case against Black at that stage would weaken the overall investigation, and the charges were dropped without prejudice, meaning they could be refiled if new evidence emerged. Despite the dismissal, Black remained under public scrutiny. Many continued to associate him with the incident, and his name circulated widely on social media as a presumed gunman. Attention shifted in March 2025 when U.S. Marshals, working with Amarillo Police and the Texas Department of Public Safety, arrested 20-year-old Maron Bailey in Dallas. He was indicted by a grand jury on a murder charge related to Felita's death. Unlike the quick dismissal of Black's case, Marin's indictment signaled a more substantial set of evidence reviewed by a panel of citizens under the guidance of prosecutors. This step indicated that investigators believed there was probable cause to proceed with a full trial. At this stage, legal observers noted several possible outcomes: a plea deal, in which Maron might agree to admit guilt to a lesser charge in exchange for a reduced sentence; a full trial, in which the state would present all evidence before a jury; or a mistrial or retrial, if complications arose during proceedings. Each option carried significant implications. A plea deal could end the case quickly, but leave lingering questions about the full truth. A trial would provide public testimony and evidence, but risk a hung jury if consensus could not be reached. The district attorney's office, responsible for managing the prosecution, faced scrutiny from a family and community over delays and limited public communication. The grand jury process itself raised questions. Grand jury proceedings are conducted in secret, with no defense attorneys present and jurors hearing only from prosecutors and selected witnesses. While this process ensures confidentiality, it also fosters skepticism in high-profile cases where families and the public demand transparency. Another issue anticipated in the upcoming trial was jury selection. High-profile cases in Amarillo often struggled to seat jurors without preconceived opinions due to extensive media coverage. The community's familiarity with both suspects, as well as the victim's prominence, increased the likelihood of bias. Defense attorneys would seek jurors skeptical of law enforcement evidence, while prosecutors would aim to seat jurors sympathetic to victims of violence. The length and rigor of voir dire, the questioning of potential jurors, was expected to be central in determining whether Maron Bailey's trial could proceed smoothly. The legal proceedings were far from concluded. While one suspect walked free from immediate charges, another awaited trial. For Felita's family, the delays and reversals meant the pursuit of justice remained ongoing and uncertain. In the months following shooting, Felita's family consistently voiced frustration with the investigation and the legal process. They organized public rallies demanding accountability, holding signs, speaking to local media, and using social media campaigns to spread awareness of her case. Hashtags such as #JusticeForFeifei appeared across platforms, and TikTok videos recounting her story drew thousands of views. The family expressed their grief mixed with uncertainty as the case continued without a definitive resolution. With Dylan Black initially charged and then released, they questioned how the system could move so quickly to arrest but just as quickly abandon charges. The subsequent arrest of Maron Bailey months later brought some relief, but a long gap left them doubtful of whether law enforcement had acted with urgency. Family members spoke in interviews about experiencing too many delays and unclear answers. The secrecy of the grand jury process prevented them from knowing what evidence existed or how close investigators had been to charging Maron earlier. They argued that each postponement compounded their pain, making it difficult to grieve while still fighting for clarity and accountability. Despite these frustrations, the family worked to ensure that Felita's story remained visible. They emphasized the importance of remembering her life, not only the circumstances of her death. In speeches, interviews, and memorial events, they highlighted her education, her goals in dental hygiene, her supportive role in the family, and her energy as a daughter, sister, and friend. They wanted Felita remembered for who she was, not reduced to a victim of gun violence. This effort represented a broader push to honor her life, alongside the demand for justice. In doing so, the family kept pressure on the legal system, insisting that Felita's case not be sidelined or forgotten among Amarillo's ongoing caseload of violent crimes. The case of Felita Fifi, Yovan Bailey reveals a layered story of potential cut short, systemic challenges, and unanswered questions. At just 25 years old, Felita was pursuing a career in dental hygiene, employed at Tyson Foods, and building toward a stable future. Her goals were practical, tied to improving her life and providing for her family. The abrupt end of those ambitions underscores a loss not only to her loved ones, but to the community that knew her. Her family's experience has been marked by both grief and betrayal. Grief in losing a daughter, sister, and friend. Betrayal in witnessing how the legal system moved slowly and opaquely, leaving them with limited information about the progress of the case. The dismissal of charges against one suspect, followed months later by the indictment of another, only reinforced the sense that clarity was elusive. As of now, legal justice remains pending, with Felita Bailey awaiting trial and no final verdict issued. The truth of what happened on the night of August 31st, 2024, is not fully revealed. The details of who fired, why, and under what circumstances remain contested, left to be sorted out in court proceedings that may stretch months or years into the future. This story reflects larger lessons about how communities and institutions handle violence. It highlights the vulnerability of young women, especially Black women, in social settings where safety can evaporate in moments. It exposes how systemic mistrust grows when law enforcement offers little transparency. It shows how families can be forced into dual roles, mourning their loved one while also becoming advocates for justice. Felita's case is both singular and symbolic. Singular in the sense that it is her personal story, with unique details and circumstances. Symbolic in the way it mirrors broader issues, violence in nightlife spaces, the slow churn of legal systems, the pressure placed on families to keep their loved one's memory alive. The closing thought is stark. One young woman, one night, and one bullet have left behind questions larger than any single family. Felita's story is not only about her death, but about the shadows it uncovers and how justice is sought, delayed, and sometimes denied. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.
When they told you I was bad, they mean super duper bad. A whole herder class with the perfect round ass, jazzy attitude to match. Her body got more curves than the Coca-Cola glass.
On September 16th, 2021, deputies responded to reports of gunfire at a home on Osceola Circle in Fairfield, Alabama. Inside, they found a 27-year-old woman with gunshot wounds. She was transported to a Birmingham hospital and later pronounced dead. The shooter was identified as a 45-year-old man, the husband of her cousin. He remained at the scene long enough to call authorities before leaving and was later located at a nearby convenience store. Investigators confirmed the two were involved in a dispute that escalated quickly. The man admitted to firing the weapon but claimed the act was in self-defense. He told investigators that the woman had threatened him and was armed. Detectives processed the scene, collected evidence, and took statements from those present during the argument. The incident report documented the progression of events from a verbal exchange to a fatal shooting. Months later, a Jefferson County grand jury indicted the shooter on intentional murder charges. Court records show the case then centered on whether Alabama's stand your ground law applied. The defense argued the statute protected his actions, while prosecutors maintained the shooting was unlawful. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Ladiamonique Esta Zaire-Simmons was a 27-year-old resident of Birmingham, Alabama. At the time of her death, she was a mother of 3 young children. She lived with her family in a residential neighborhood and maintained a routine centered on her children and household responsibilities. Her life revolved around her family, her home, and her local community. Her familial connections were close-knit. She had a cousin who was married to Cliven Milton, the individual later identified as her shooter. Within her extended family, she was recognized as a figure of responsibility and consistency, maintaining regular contact and engagement with relatives. Beyond her family, she was known in her neighborhood and social circles as a reliable and active community member. She participated in local events and was present in various community-driven activities. Personality and character reports describe Ladiamonique as a mother deeply committed to her children, resilient in managing daily responsibilities, and consistent in her social engagements. She was considered warm, reliable, and proactive in her personal and family interactions. Ladiamonique maintained a presence on social media, particularly Facebook, where she shared aspects of her daily life, family interactions, and social connections. These posts reflected routine activities, her responsibilities as a mother, and her social relationships. Her online activity painted a picture of a woman embedded in her family and community, maintaining the roles expected of her within both environments. Her standing in the community was notable. Neighbors, acquaintances, and local community members recognized her reliability and presence. Following her death, memorials and tributes appeared online and in person, reflecting the recognition she received in her community. The incident leading to Ladiamonique's death occurred at a residential property on Osceola Circle in Fairfield, Alabama. The event took place during the early morning hours, around 1 a.m. The circumstances involved a domestic dispute with family members present. Reports from law enforcement indicate that the argument escalated, transitioning from a verbal confrontation to a physical encounter. Specific details from witnesses vary, but it is documented that a disagreement occurred immediately prior to the shooting. During this confrontation, Ladiamonique was shot by Cliven Milton. Milton later stated that he perceived a threat and claimed that Ladiamonique had brandished a firearm and presented imminent danger to him. The shooting occurred on site before law enforcement arrived. Following the shooting, Milton placed a 911 call reporting the incident. Deputies responding to the call arrived at the property and found Ladiamonique with gunshot wounds. Emergency medical services were contacted immediately. Milton was subsequently located by law enforcement at a nearby convenience store, where he was taken into custody for questioning. Emergency responders transported Ladiamonique to a local hospital. Upon arrival, she was evaluated by medical personnel and pronounced dead shortly thereafter. The precise duration from the time of the shooting to the pronouncement of death has not been publicly detailed, but hospital records confirm that she was deceased on arrival. The investigation focused on multiple factors, including weapon ownership, prior domestic disputes, and the dynamics between Ladiamonique and Milton. Law enforcement collected information regarding the firearm used in the incident, any history of domestic tension, and potential witness statements from family and neighbors. Authorities secured physical and digital evidence from the scene. Ballistics tests were conducted on the firearm involved to determine its involvement in the fatal shot. Fingerprints were taken from the weapon and surrounding surfaces to verify handling. If available, surveillance footage from nearby homes or security cameras was requested to clarify movements and interactions prior to the shooting. The 911 call placed by Milton was recorded and preserved as part of the official investigation. Law enforcement reviewed the call for statements indicating the sequence of events, perceived threats, and any admissions or observations relevant to establishing intent or self-defense. Multiple individuals present during the incident provided statements. These included family members who were involved in the domestic dispute and neighbors who may have observed parts of the incident. Conflicting accounts emerged regarding whether Ladiamonique posed a threat at the time of the shooting. Some statements corroborated Milton's claim that she had a weapon or acted aggressively, while others indicated no visible threat was present prior to the shooting. The collection and comparison of these witness statements formed a significant part of the investigative record, contributing to the legal assessment of the shooting and the subsequent self-defense claim. Following the fatal shooting of Ladiamonique Esta Zaire-Simmons on September 16, 2021, law enforcement conducted a thorough investigation into the circumstances surrounding the incident. Deputies collected evidence from the scene at Osceola Circle in Fairfield, Alabama, including witness statements, ballistic reports, and recordings from a 911 call placed by Cliven Milton, the alleged shooter. Milton, 45 years old and married to Simmons' cousin, had claimed that the shooting occurred in self-defense. After several months of investigation, the Jefferson County grand jury reviewed the evidence and, in February 2022, formally indicted Cliven Milton for intentional murder. The indictment outlined a legal charge that Milton had caused the death of Simmons through intentional action, establishing the basis for prosecution. The indictment marked the first formal step in the legal process, signaling that the case would proceed to the judicial system for trial. The grand jury's decision followed standard procedures under Alabama law, reflecting consideration of witness statements, physical evidence, and the circumstances of the dispute that resulted in the shooting. In response to the indictment, the defense entered claim of self-defense under Alabama's Stand Your Ground statute. This law permits individuals to use force, including lethal force, when they reasonably perceive an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm. The defense argued that Milton acted within his legal rights at the time of the incident, asserting that he faced a direct threat from Simmons. During pretrial preparations and hearings, the defense emphasized Milton's perception of danger. Testimonies were presented indicating that Milton believed Simmons had a firearm and intended to use it against him. The defense maintained that Milton's response was proportional to perceived threat, highlighting his awareness of personal risk during the altercation. These testimonies became central to the case, as a determination of whether Milton's belief in imminent danger was reasonable would play a pivotal role in the legal outcome. The trial process included multiple pre-trial hearings and motions, during which the prosecution and defense examined the admissibility of evidence, witnesses, and legal arguments. Evidence under review included the firearm involved in the shooting, forensic analysis from the scene, and the 911 call recordings. The prosecution sought to establish intentionality and challenge a claim of self-defense, while the defense aimed to reinforce Milton's perceived threat and compliance with the parameters of Stand Your Ground law. Pre-trial hearings also addressed procedural matters, such as the disclosure of witness statements and the sequencing of testimonies. Motions were filed to include or exclude specific pieces of evidence, and judges presided over arguments from both sides regarding legal interpretations of self-defense standards. This period of the trial was crucial in shaping the legal framework for how the case would be evaluated, including determining which elements of the Stand Your Ground statute would apply. After the trial and comprehensive evaluation of evidence, the court reached a decision in March 2024. The judge dismissed the murder charges against Cliven Milton, ruling that his actions were legally justified under Alabama's Stand Your Ground law. The ruling concluded that the prosecution had not sufficiently disproven Milton's claim of self-defense, establishing that the circumstances of the incident fell within the legal protections afforded by the statute. The judge's explanation highlighted the legal reasoning behind the dismissal, noting that Alabama law permits individuals to use lethal force if they reasonably perceive a threat of death or serious bodily injury. The decision clarified that the perception of danger, even if disputed by others, can legally justify the use of force, provided that the actions taken are proportional to the threat. This interpretation aligned with the statutory language of Stand Your Ground laws and set a precedent for similar cases within the jurisdiction. The dismissal of charges generated widespread attention from both local and national observers. Legal experts analyzed the application of the Stand Your Ground statute, debating the extent to which perceived threats can justify lethal action. Discussions focused on the standards of reasonableness, proportionality, and evidentiary requirements for self-defense claims. Commentators highlighted the complexities inherent in cases where familial relationships intersect with allegations of violent action. Public response was mixed. Some observers supported the ruling, noting that the legal framework permitted Milton's actions under conditions established by the law. Others questioned the decision, arguing that the dismissal may have overlooked key factors regarding intentionality and escalation during domestic disputes. The legal debate underscored ongoing tension between statutory protections and public perceptions of justice. The family of Ladiamonique Esta Zaire-Simmons experienced immediate consequences following the court ruling. Her children and extended family members were confronted with a legal outcome, which formally cleared Milton of criminal liability. While the account remains factual, family responses included expressions of concern regarding the interpretation of self-defense laws and their implications for victims. The children of the deceased lost their mother, and family members had to navigate logistical, legal, and social implications of the court's decision. Beyond the immediate family, members of the Fairfield and Birmingham communities responded to the legal proceedings with heightened attention. Local residents engaged in public discussions, with some criticizing the dismissal and calling for re-evaluation of Alabama's self-defense statutes. Calls for legislative review and potential reform of Stand Your Ground laws were documented in public forums, town meetings, and community gatherings. While expressions of outrage varied in format, the underlying issue focused on the intersection of legal protection, perceived threat, and accountability in cases of domestic violence. The case attracted coverage across multiple media platforms. Local news outlets reported on the initial shooting, the indictment, and the subsequent dismissal of charges, presenting timelines, statements from law enforcement, and judicial findings. National outlets highlighted the broader implications of the case, emphasizing debates over self-defense legislation. Social media platforms also reflected significant discussion, with posts and campaigns documenting public interest, sharing legal analyses, and referencing the life of Ladiamonique Esta Zaire-Simmons. This media attention contributed to the wider recognition of the case and maintained public engagement throughout the legal process. The dismissal of charges in this case provided a reference point for discussions about the application of stand your ground laws in Alabama. Legal scholars, community leaders, and policymakers examined the balance between individual self-protection and accountability for lethal actions. Debates included the thresholds for perceived threats, the role of evidence in proving or disproving self-defense, and the societal implications for families affected by gun violence. By documenting the procedural history, public reaction, and legal outcomes, this case serves as a study in statutory interpretation and the practical consequences of self-defense claims. The interplay between law enforcement procedures, judicial reasoning, and community response underscores the complexity of legal frameworks in incidents involving family disputes and firearm use. The aftermath of the shooting death of Ladiamonique Esta Zaire-Simmons extended far beyond the courtroom. The legal decision to dismiss the intentional murder charge under Alabama's Stand Your Ground law not only closed a chapter in the judicial system, but also opened broader discussions on law, accountability, and social consequences. The effects of the ruling spread into the private lives of her family, the policies debated in legal institutions, and the larger questions about how self-defense is defined in situations involving family members. One of the most immediate and visible impacts was on the children of Ladiamonique Simmons. As a mother of three, her absence created a permanent gap in their lives. The children were forced to grow up without maternal presence, a loss that altered the structure of their upbringing. Guardianship arrangements had to be established to provide them with stability. The children's lives, once structured around a family with their mother present, shifted to a life under the care of extended relatives and legal guardians. The emotional consequences of losing a parent under violent circumstances created challenges for the household. Daily routines, education, and long-term development were reshaped by the absence of their mother. Beyond the psychological void, the children and family faced practical issues connected to financial stability. Ladiamonique was not only a caregiver but also a source of support, and her death required adjustments in how her children's needs, educational, medical, and personal, would be met. Financial consequences came into focus as extended family members assumed responsibility for the upbringing of the children. Household income and resources had to be restructured to accommodate their needs. Support systems, such as child assistance programs and community support networks, played a role in filling the gaps left by her absence. These arrangements underscored the wider ripple effects of her death, stretching beyond the incident itself into the long-term reality of the family. The case became significant within legal circles due to the application of Alabama's Stand Your Ground law. The dismissal of charges in March 2024 set a clear example of how the law could be used in disputes occurring in private residences, even when involving family members. The interpretation of the law emphasized that if a person believed their life was threatened, they could use deadly force without the duty to retreat, regardless of pre-existing family ties. Legal analysts began to reference the Simmons case in discussions about the scope of self-defense. Commentators noted that the application of the law extended beyond confrontations with strangers and could include conflicts arising in domestic spaces. The case was cited in debates about whether the law protects individuals sufficiently or whether it creates vulnerabilities in cases where conflicting testimony exists. The precedent also fed into broader national discussions on gun legislation. Advocates for reform highlighted the Simmons case as an example of how expansive self-defense laws could intersect with tragedies within families. Lawmakers, attorneys, and advocacy groups use it as a reference point in evaluating the boundaries of justified homicide. While the dismissal resolved the legal liability of the shooter, it left ongoing debates about whether the law balanced fairness with accountability. In the wake of her death, digital and physical memorials emerged to mark the life of Ladiamonique Simmons. Online memorial pages were created on platforms such as Tribute Archive and Gun Memorial, providing a space for individuals to document her life and acknowledge the circumstances of her death. Photographs, written tributes, and recollections of her as a mother circulated through these platforms. Community vigils also took place, serving as physical gatherings for individuals to recognize her passing. Such vigils represented not only a remembrance, but also a collective acknowledgement of the impact of the event on the community. Community members organized tributes that extended beyond her immediate family, signaling the broader awareness of the case and its connection to the ongoing issues of violence and legal interpretation. These tributes reflected a communal process of addressing loss through public recognition. They preserve her memory in both digital archives and collective memory, while also tying her name to ongoing discussions about the incident and its consequences. The Simmons case highlighted broader societal issues that extended into discussions of domestic violence, firearm accessibility, and the application of self-defense laws. Analysts noted that domestic disputes are often intensified when firearms are present, leading to outcomes that might otherwise be avoided. The fatal result in this case reinforced questions about how easily accessible guns shape the outcomes of personal conflicts. The case also served as a point of reference in conversations about the interpretation of stand your ground laws. The ruling emphasized that the law could validate self-defense claims even within family disputes. This outcome created discussions about whether such laws inadvertently weaken protections for victims in domestic settings. Critics question whether individuals in conflict are equally protected, or the law disproportionately favors those who survive to present their narrative. Discussions extended into family dynamics, particularly the challenges of disputes escalating into violence when firearms are involved. Legal accountability was examined through the lens of whether the ruling provided justice to all parties, or whether it revealed structural gaps in the legal system. Victim protection also came under review, as the case illustrated how individuals who are killed in such disputes cannot present their side, leaving courts to rely on surviving testimony. These societal implications position the Simmons case not only as a singular tragedy, but as part of a broader discourse about law, violence, and the balance of rights. The death of Ladiamonique Esta Zaire-Simmons began with a domestic dispute in Fairfield, Alabama, on September 16, 2021. She was fatally shot by her cousin's husband, Cliven Milton, who claimed he acted in self-defense under the Stand Your Ground law. Initially indicted for intentional murder in 2022, Milton's charges were dismissed by a judge in March 2024. The ruling validated his claim of self-defense, closing the case legally but opening it to broader public scrutiny. The Simmons case left several questions unanswered regarding the interpretation of justice and morality. It raised issues about how the law applies when conflicts involve family members. It highlighted the difficulties of determining truth in cases where one party is deceased and the other asserts self-defense. The reliance on legal frameworks, such as Stand Your Ground, provided closure within the courts but left open-ended debates in public forums. The long-term consequences remain evident. For the family, particularly the children, the loss is permanent. For the legal system, the case serves as a precedent and a discussion point for future considerations of self-defense law. For the community, the incident continues to illustrate the intersection of domestic disputes, firearm use, and the legal definitions of justified homicide. The Simmons case underscores the complexity of balancing individual rights, family relationships, and societal expectations within the framework of law. While the court ruling brought a conclusion to the legal proceedings, it left broader questions about accountability and justice unresolved, ensuring that the case continues to be referenced in discussions about law and society. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.